Gavroche would have done better to accept Enjolras' carbine. They threw a long black shawl of widow Hucheloup's over Father Mabeuf. 6 men made a litter of their guns. On this they laid the body, and bore it, with bared heads, with solemn slowness, to the large table in the tap-room. These men, wholly absorbed in the grave and sacred task in which they were engaged, thought no more of the perilous situation in which they stood. When the corpse passed near Javert, who was still impassive, Enjolras said to the spy, "It will be your turn presently." During all this time, little Gavroche, who alone had not quitted his post, but had remained on guard, thought he espied some men stealthily approaching the barricade. All at once he shouted, "Look out!" Courfeyrac, Enjolras, Jean Prouvaire, Combeferre, Joly, Bahorel, Bossuet, and all the rest ran tumultuously from the wine shop. It was almost too late. They saw a glistening density of bayonets undulating above the barricade. Municipal guards of lofty stature were making their way in, some striding over the omnibus, others through the cut, thrusting before them the urchin, who retreated, but did not flee. The moment was critical. It was that first, redoubtable moment of inundation, when the stream rises to the level of the levee and when the water begins to filter through the fissures of dike. A second more and the barricade would have been taken. Bahorel dashed upon the first municipal guard who was entering, and killed him on the spot with a blow from his gun. The second killed Bahorel with a blow from his bayonet. Another had already overthrown Courfeyrac, who was shouting, "Follow me." The largest of all, a sort of colossus, marched on Gavroche with his bayonet fixed. The urchin took in his arms Javert's immense gun, leveled it resolutely at the giant, and fired. No discharge followed. Javert's gun was not loaded. The municipal guard burst into a laugh and raised his bayonet at the child. Before the bayonet had touched Gavroche, the gun slipped from the soldier's grasp, a bullet had struck the municipal guardsman in the center of the forehead, and he fell over on his back. A second bullet struck the other guard, who had assaulted Courfeyrac in the breast, and laid him low on the pavement. This was the work of Marius, who had just entered the barricade. Chapter 4. The Barrel of Powder. Marius, still concealed in the turn of the Rue Mondétour, had witnessed, shuddering and irresolute, the first phase of the combat. But he had not long been able to resist that mysterious and sovereign vertigo which may be designated as the call of the abyss. In the presence of the imminence of the peril, in the presence of the death of M. Mabeuf, that melancholy enigma, in the presence of Bahorel killed, and Courfeyrac shouting, "Follow me," of that child threatened, of his friends to succor or to avenge, all hesitation had vanished, and he had flung himself into the conflict, his 2 pistols in hand. With his first shot he had saved Gavroche, and with the second delivered Courfeyrac. Amid the sound of the shots, amid the cries of the assaulted guards, the assailants had climbed the entrenchment, on whose summit municipal guards, soldiers of the line and national guards from the suburbs could now be seen, gun in hand, rearing themselves to more than half the height of their bodies. They already covered more than 2/3 of the barrier, but they did not leap into the enclosure, as though wavering in the fear of some trap. They gazed into the dark barricade as one would gaze into a lion's den. The light of the torch illuminated only their bayonets, their bare skin caps, and the upper part of their uneasy and angry faces. Marius had no longer any weapons. He had flung away his discharged pistols after firing them. But he had caught sight of the barrel of powder in the taproom, near the door. As he turned half round, gazing in that direction, a soldier took aim at him. At the moment when the soldier was sighting Marius, a hand was laid on the muzzle of the gun and obstructed it. This was done by someone who had darted forward, the young workman in velvet trousers. The shot sped, traversed the hand and possibly, also, the workman, since he fell, but the ball did not strike Marius. All this, which was rather to be apprehended than seen through the smoke, Marius, who was entering the tap-room, hardly noticed. Still, he had, in a confused way, perceived that gun barrel aimed at him, and the hand which had blocked it, and he had heard the discharge. But in moments like this, the things which one sees vacillate and are precipitated, and one pauses for nothing. One feels obscurely impelled towards more darkness still, and all is cloud. The insurgents, surprised but not terrified, had rallied. Enjolras had shouted, "Wait! Don't fire at random." In the first confusion, they might, in fact, wound each other. The majority of them had ascended to the window on the first story and to the attic windows, whence they commanded the assailants. The most determined, with Enjolras, Courfeyrac, Jean Prouvaire, and Combeferre, had proudly placed themselves with their backs against the houses at the rear, unsheltered and facing the ranks of soldiers and guards who crowned the barricade. All this was accomplished without haste, with that strange and threatening gravity which precedes engagements. They took aim, point blank, on both sides. They were so close that they could talk together without raising their voices. When they had reached this point where the spark is on the brink of darting forth, an officer in a gorget extended his sword and said, "Lay down your arms." "Fire," replied Enjolras. The two discharges took place at the same moment, and all disappeared in smoke. An acrid and stifling smoke in which dying and wounded lay with weak, dull groans. When the smoke cleared away, the combatants on both sides could be seen to be thinned out, but still in the same positions, reloading in silence. All at once, a thundering voice was heard, shouting, "Be off with you, or I'll blow up the barricade." All turned in the direction whence the voice proceeded. Marius had entered the tap-room, and had seized the barrel of powder. Then he had taken advantage of the smoke, and the sort of obscure mist which filled the entrenched enclosure, to glide along the barricade as far as that cage of paving stones where the torch was fixed. To tear it from the torch. To replace it by the barrel of powder. To thrust the pile of stones under the barrel, which was instantly staved in, with a sort of horrible obedience. All this had cost Marius, but the time necessary to stoop and rise again. And now all National Guards, Municipal Guards, officers, soldiers, huddled at the other extremity of the barricade, gazed stupidly at him, as he stood with his foot on the stones, his torch in his hand, his haughty face illuminated by a fatal resolution, drooping the flame of the torch towards that redoubtable pile where they could make out the broken barrel of powder, and giving vent to that startling cry, "Be off with you, or I'll blow up the barricade." Marius on that barricade after the octogenarian was the vision of the young revolution after the apparition of the old. "Blow up the barricade," said a sergeant, "and yourself with it." Marius retorted, "And myself also." And he dropped the torch towards the barrel of powder. But there was no longer anyone on the barrier. The assailants, abandoning their dead and wounded, flowed back pell-mell and in disorder towards the extremity of the street, and they were again lost in the night. It was a headlong flight. The barricade was free. Chapter 5. End of the verses of Jean Prouvaire. All flocked around Marius. Courfeyrac flung himself on his neck. "Here you are. What luck," said Combeferre. "You came in opportunely," ejaculated Bossuet. "If it had not been for you, I should have been dead," began Courfeyrac again. "If it had not been for you, I should have been gobbled up," added Gavroche. Marius asked, "Where is the chief?" "You are he," said Enjolras. Marius had had a furnace in his brain all day long. Now it was a whirlwind. This whirlwind which was within him, produced on him the effect of being outside of him and of bearing him away. It seemed to him that he was already at an immense distance from life. His 2 luminous months of joy and love, ending abruptly at that frightful precipice, Cosette lost to him, that barricade, Mabeuf getting himself killed for the Republic, himself the leader of the insurgents, all these things appeared to him like a tremendous nightmare. He was obliged to make a mental effort to recall the fact that all that surrounded him was real. Marius had already seen too much of life not to know that nothing is more imminent than the impossible, and that what it is always necessary to foresee is the unforeseen. He had looked on at his own drama as a piece which one does not understand. In the mists which enveloped his thoughts, he did not recognize Javert, who, bound to his post, had not so much as moved his head during the whole of the attack on the barricade, and who had gazed on the revolt seething around him with the resignation of a martyr and the majesty of a judge. Marius had not even seen him. In the meanwhile, the assailants did not stir. They could be heard marching and swarming through at the end of the street, but they did not venture into it. Either because they were awaiting orders or because they were awaiting reinforcements before hurling themselves afresh on this impregnable redoubt. The insurgents had posted sentinels, and some of them, who were medical students, set about caring for the wounded. They had thrown the tables out of the wine shop, with the exception of the 2 tables reserved for lint and cartridges, and of the one on which lay Father Mabeuf. They had added him to the barricade, and had replaced them in the tap room with mattresses from the bed of the widow Hucheloup and her servants. On these mattresses they had laid the wounded. As for the 3 poor creatures who inhabited Corinthe, no one knew what had become of them. They were finally found, however, hidden in the cellar. A poignant emotion clouded the joy of the disencumbered barricade. The roll was called. One of the insurgents was missing. And who was it? One of the dearest. One of the most valiant. Jean Prouvaire. He was sought among the wounded. He was not there. He was sought among the dead. He was not there. He was evidently a prisoner. Combeferre said to Enjolras, "They have our friend. We have their agent. Are you set on the death of that spy?" "Yes," replied Enjolras, "but less so than on the life of Jean Prouvaire." This took place in the taproom near Javert's post. "Well," resumed Combeferre, "I am going to fasten my handkerchief to my cane, and go as a flag of truce, to offer to exchange our man for theirs." "Listen," said Enjolras, laying his hand on Combeferre's arm. At the end of the street there was a significant clash of arms. They heard a manly voice shout, "Vive la France! Long live France! Long live the future!" They recognized the voice of Prouvaire. A flash passed, a report rang out. Silence fell again. "They have killed him!" exclaimed Combeferre. Enjolras glanced at Javert, and said to him, "Your friends have just shot you."